I fell into mortgage in 2006 by accident, for lack of a better idea, as most people when they fall into mortgage. I got in right before things started to collapse. I had to ride that storm out, right in the heart of everything. We were one of the big five, so pick your movie. We were a character in that movie, and my life basically got stolen. A lot of people thought that the GFC ended, 2008 was
Say it again. What is that again?
the great financial crisis, or, some call it the global financial crisis, whatever, GFC. Thank you
Yep.
for stopping me there.
Yeah.
Um, it really went on for those of us in the business all the way up to like 2014, 2015, where it kind of like petered out with a whisper. And that was largely because Wall Street got invited by the agencies into the space to offload a lot of those default properties. This is how you guys get involved, right? Because they then sell them off, to folks that are interested. Really, I can't even describe what that time was like. But at the end of it, after going through our bankruptcy and all kinds of stuff, I managed to default because we were getting threats from the agencies that they were going to pull servicing, which would have meant a lot of people would have lost jobs. And servicing, what is that? That's just, taking the payments. If they go into default, taking those actions. From there, I tried to go out and help other non-banks really get their houses in order because what we were starting to see was this explosion of non-bank lending because of the Basel III requirements. So
Yeah.
that's just basically it was stricter for the banks, put it that way, and the banks got risk weighted on their mortgage assets, and they kind of said, "I'm not playing around anymore in this space, and definitely not at the scale that I used to." So the non-banks kind of stepped in. None of them had really been big during that time. And so they really didn't understand a lot of the regulations in the same way that many of us did who kind of were there as they were being written. So put it this way, they weren't all that interested. I kind of got to the point where I realized nothing could change a mortgage until technology changed. And so because the technology is from the 60s, early 70s, blue and black screens. And so I went off to Fintech and tried to change it from outside of mortgage proper, to realize that because of sort of the monopolies of technology, not my monopolies like ICE and folks like this, that wasn't going to work either. And then I started diving into macroeconomics, something I had done in my academic career, but I'd kind of pushed to the side
Mm.
because one of the people that I worked for said, when are rates going to rise? Because we had a very heavy origination arm and they were making bank, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
was just crazy back then. I remember not sleeping, eating. It was a crazy time. I remember being at PNC and we were imaging like through OCR, which is like a technology, optical character recognition. We were doing something like 30,000 pages a day for refis, and that went to a million like
Oh my goodness.
overnight. It was
Wow.
insanity. And so it was just nuts because everybody was going to refinance. I started really diving into this and reading books and looking, and I joined Twitter. I'm not a social media person. That some people are going to laugh with me saying that, but I really wasn't. I can't even get me on Facebook to look at anything. But I joined because there were certain economists that I couldn't find their stuff anywhere else. So I went on Twitter, started really getting into what's called FinTwit. That's what they call it. And it's like financial Twitter. And I started posting when I really, I started getting concerned in 21, and I was reaching out to industry insiders and saying, guys, this isn't sustainable. Home prices are going, accelerating so quickly. We don't even know how fast and how high. And sure enough, where we are now, Nashville actually, Nate, they just came out and people are getting their tax notices and they are freaking out in Williamson
Mm.
County
Hmm.
because the valuations have just gone through the roof. Meanwhile, downtown, those valuations are going down for the commercial real estate. And so, put it this way,
Interesting.
there's a huge overhang to home prices getting this high, including rising
Yeah.
property taxes, rising insurance, rising replacement costs, as well as with inflation and things like that. People haven't been able to do repairs to their homes. And so we know, essentially the values already are out there that were inflated because we just went into this craziness of FOMO, or fear of missing out, and you only live once. And then on top of that, what I don't think people really understand about the housing market that got started in the late 90s, really even late 80s, I should say, is how much investor speculation has come into this market. How
Mhm.
much people see owning real estate as, kind of a hedge, right? And so people from all over the world piled in. People from Canada,
Yep.
people from China, buying our real estate, and a lot of it sits empty. We have over 15 million vacant properties in this country, and an
Wow.
additional 3 million seasonal properties. Okay, so uh, I encourage everybody on your drives, just look around. There's so much vacancy because we're also entering a situation where, we have a large generation that is aging and leaving us, and
Mhm.
they are the ones who own most of the homes. And so
Mhm.
I've been helping with several heir situations, where people have inherited a home. There's some kind of issue with it. So we're seeing this in mass because Harvard recently just said to us, between 2025 and 2035, we're going to lose 15.6 million boomers. And between 2035 and 2050, we're going to lose 23 million. So let me back up,
Wow.
David, to how did I? So I just started tweeting and I was deep into this research. And one day I got up and read an article by Bloomberg that infuriated me because I just couldn't understand why anybody was missing this housing story. So I got in my car, and the first place I stopped was Nashville.
Mhm.
And I drove the entire perimeter, the downtown, and I was floored by all the new build construction. And I was like, this is crazy. Then I got to Austin, and that was just a whole different level. So, anyway, since then, I've driven over 10,000 miles. I've flown way more than that. And I write about it in my Substack. I go on YouTube's and talk about it. I attend conferences. And so, this has kind of become my full-time job, although I still do have mortgage clients that I help with things like subservicer oversight, due
So
diligence.
what does a sub servicer typically mean?
Okay, so servicing gets super complicated. There's a master servicer, primary subservicer. So a subservicer is kind of like, let's say I'm Chase, okay, and I have a huge book, but I want to send my delinquent out to somebody who specializes in that. And
Mhm.
so they're going to say, okay, although I do service my own book over here, this chunk I'm sending to this servicer over there. And they're going to be my sub-servicer. And so I pay them fees to service my loans. Whereas when I own my servicing, that's how I'm kind of compensated. Uh, so through all that legislation that happened way back then, the biggest component was lack of third party oversight. And I saw this very much in my own company. All of a sudden I would go to talk to people like, why do we do this way? Why do we do this? And people were clueless about how servicing
Mhm.
actually worked. We just hired a whole bunch of vendors to do it for us. And we just believed them that they were doing it correctly.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the biggest things from the OCC, or the Office of the Comptroller, is that you have to get your house in order and you have to do oversight of your third parties. And so one big requirement for all the mortgage folks is that you have to do like monthly scorecarding, looking at different metrics, making sure that they're doing their job. So that's a subservicer.